Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. Today I will be bringing you my month in review for April. I'm a little bit late and I do apologize that I didn't post anything after I went to London, but not gonna lie, just kind of like super busy, and yeah, I didn't read that much this month. I read a grand total of 10 books with an average star rating of about 3.82, which again, I rate out of 5, so that's pretty good, and it's probably really high, again, because I only read 10 books, so each book is therefore going to carry a greater weight when it comes to me averaging out my star ratings. I rated 3 books 5 out of 5 stars, 1 book a 2 out of 5 stars, and another book a 2.75 out of 5 stars. The first book that I rated 5 out of 5 stars was The Winner's Kiss by Maria Rutowski, which is the third and final book in the Winner's trilogy. It was one of my most anticipated books of the year, and guys, I was like not emotionally prepared for how well written this was. I really highly recommend this series. It's a YA, I'm gonna call it a political fantasy, because there are fantastical elements that sometimes appear, and like it's clearly a made-up world, but it's not necessarily magic or anything involved. It's much more about political scheming, and there's a slow burn romance that happens, which I actually liked. Shocking, I know. And I think in this third and final book, we really saw the progression of the characters over the 3 books. We got a little more of some things that were mentioned in the first 2, but never really elaborated upon, and I really just enjoyed this conclusion so much. The next book I rated 5 out of 5 stars was Hamilton: The Revolution by Lin-Manuel Miranda, the highly coveted Hamiltome, as we know. I think anybody and everybody knows what Hamilton is. It's kind of like swept the known world, basically. I was very excited for this book to come out. It came out while I was in London, so I actually, while in London, ordered it to ship to my apartment. So it was there when I came back. It was quite a nice thing. And it's really phenomenal. It's all of the text of the musical, including the full text of the Adams administration rap that got cut. It's got the scene where we found out about John Lawrence, which is the one scene that's not on the original soundtrack, and it's got tons of notes and extra information. This is stuff that I eat up and I love, and it's really a big, beautiful hardcover. If you can find it, I highly recommend picking it up. I do, however, say do not get this on digital. Just don't do it. It was designed, I think, really to be held and to be looked at, and I've heard the digital does not translate real well. I can't say anything for the audio, I haven't listened, but great book. And if you're into Hamilton, you need the Hamiltome. And if you're into Hamilton, you don't need me to tell you you need the Hamiltome, because you know that you need it. The third and final book that I rated a 5 out of 5 stars was The Chimes by Anna Smale, I believe is how you pronounce her name. This was a really interesting book, and I've had my eye on it for a while. Unfortunately, I couldn't find it in the United States. It was longlisted for the Man Booker Prize last year, and I couldn't find it in the States. I couldn't even find it on digital. I knew I had to get it from overseas and get it shipped. So while I was in London, I went to the bookstore and I picked it up because I was like, why not? So this is a kind of dystopia-ish. We're gonna call it a dystopia-ish, in which everything revolves around music. So what's really neat is the actual kind of jargon and language of this world is based around musical terms. So instead of saying he walked slowly, it'll say he walked lento. Lento obviously meaning slowly. And they'll say, you know, the voices grew presto, and musical terminology is everywhere in the jargon of this novel. And there's even a hand signal language that's based around the signs for solfege, which is do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. And I really found this interesting. It was why I really wanted to read it, and I really, really enjoyed it. Apparently, literally, I was in the bookstore today. It just released in hardcover in the US. So, I'm assuming you can now find it in the US. It took them long enough. The book that I rated a 2 out of 5 stars was Warrior Witch by Danielle Jensen. This is the third and final book in the Malediction trilogy, which is published actually, I believe, by Amazon. And the first book is entitled Stolen Songbird, which is the only book I actually never read as an arc. I've read almost every book in this series as an arc, and I kind of enjoyed Stolen Songbird. Even though, yeah, it was a lot of a paranormal romance, they were doing some interesting things with, of all things, trolls, and I found it really interesting. There was enough in there that I was like, oh, this could be good. I thought the second book was okay. I thought it was really way too slow, but there was a lot of potential. And in the third book, I thought initially all the problems that I had with the second book, and that it was really too slow, had been fixed because it kind of hit the ground running and went. And then I realized it hit an emotional pitch and then coasted there. And there was no real good sense of emotional catharsis or anything else like that. And I thought the ending was so bad and so poorly executed. I was furious when I finished. And it has nothing to do with, in the case of many trilogies like this, you know, who ended up with whom, because most of the time it's like ship wars. Oh, I just want to make sure the couple gets together. I'm like, I'm not interested in that. I'm actually, from a narrative perspective, I want to know how this plays out. And from a narrative perspective, I thought the ending was awful. And that was really why I didn't like this book. Besides the fact that I think it dragged on too long and kind of hit the emotional coasting, I could have dealt with that, but the ending was so horrid. It really colored my entire opinion of this novel and of this series. I'm kind of under the impression now that maybe this should have just been a standalone. Like, if she could have fleshed out Stolen Songbird to be a single book, maybe a duology, it really didn't need to be a trilogy. And the book that I rated a 2.75-ish out of 5 stars was Learning to Swear in America by Katie Kennedy. This was another arc. I actually read this on the plane while I was flying over to London. And I thought it sounded kind of cool. It's about this teenage Russian scientist. He's like a bit of a genius, and there's a comet coming to Earth, or asteroid coming to Earth. It's going to smack the Earth, and so NASA kind of brings him over, and they say, help us to, you know, join the team, help us stop the asteroid. And that part of the story, like, yeah, it's a little ridiculous, but I could buy it. And then they went ahead and did, like, my least favorite thing you could do. And what they did was they introduced the trope of the manic pixie dream girl, which I hate so much. And that half of the story, which then eventually took over the story, was so insufferable. I ended up really not liking this novel by the end of it. However, there were good things, hence I rated it like a 2.75-ish out of 5. I don't know. I think there are a lot of people who are really gonna like this book. It's just that trope angered me so much, and then the fact that it just kept going, it never let up, and the story got like derailed, and I didn't understand what we were doing or what was the point of a lot of it. It just kind of fell apart for me, and I think this is just my taste. I think a lot of people are really gonna like it. There are elements of it kind of being a neat YA contemporary that a lot of people will, you know, resonate with, and just wasn't for me. I wrote a couple of blog posts while I was in London. I'm gonna just list them all on the screen here while I sort of explain them. I'm a bit of a free association writer when I go abroad, so what I did was kind of at various points in time and days, I would just sort of start scribbling down in a notebook, which I always carry with me. And it is equal parts like traveling, reviews, ideas, fiction. There's no real rhyme or reason to these posts. If you feel like just basically seeing me babble, you can go ahead and check those out. Outside of that, I would like to highlight some really cool book mail I got the other day. So this doesn't really count as part of April. Actually, no, it kind of does. If you guys know, Suvoodoo did their big yearly cage match, and it was dynamic duos, and as we know, I love Red Rising trilogy, Pierce Brown, brilliant, you all need to read it. And Darrow and Severo were up in part of it, so I was constantly going to vote for Darrow and Severo, and the big thing was if you helped, you know, vote to try and get Darrow and Severo to win because they made it to the finale against Legolas and Gimli. Pierce Brown wrote that final cage match, and it was hilarious. It was so much fun to read, number one. If you did that, you would, like, you know, show that you voted and, like, tweet your support out at, you know, the various Sons of Ares accounts, and you could win some really cool buttons and swag. And I was like, Red Rising swag? Absolutely. I want Red Rising swag because there's not enough of it. And I just want all the swag. It's fine. I'm a fangirl. So, I actually won a set of buttons. I'm showing you the back of this envelope so you don't have my address. Sorry, y'all. Was communicating with a Helldiver, which was great. I got my fantastic note with some really cool buttons, which I will now show you. Totally keeping this note, by the way. It's going with my books because it's great. So first button we have is just a Sons of Ares button, which I love this logo. I was dumb and didn't, like, create 20 million accounts for the fantastic Kickstarter campaign that was going on with Joel Daniel Phillips and Pierce Brown for a whole bunch of Red Rising stuff. I did buy a really beautiful sign print that I was just like, that I want. But they did have t-shirts, and I should have gotten a t-shirt with this because I dig it. I love this logo. It's the Sons of Ares logo, and the other button is a quote from Morningstar. It says, "Shit escalates," which is a phrase I use a lot, actually. So I absolutely love these buttons. They're going with my books on my bookcase. And this note, I'm gonna tuck it into one of the books because I have a tendency to keep like book related stuff all together because I'm a nerd and it's fine. But that's it for me today, you guys. So until next time, cheers.